Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of JavaScript for Intermediate Programmers. In episode 1, we did some graphics and animation and learned the basics of JavaScript, but today we are going to do the front end client side of a web application using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Just as in episode 1, let's get started with the P5.js editor. And rather than using the P5.js library, we're going to do something different. We're going to start from scratch. So take all this starter code that the P5 editor so nicely decides to give you, and we're just going to get rid of it all. Right? In fact, I'm going to almost get rid of it all. I'm going to get rid of some of it. How about that? I'm going to at least keep a little bit of the HTML. HTML is, well, used to stand for hypertext markup language, but you can think of it as the markup language for defining what your web application has in the browser. What content is the browser going to render? And right now it's not rendering anything, right? All we have right now is we say that our document has some meta information, the character set, and a link to a style sheet file called style.css. Not a great name, but it'll do for now. And a script, sketch.js. What are these things, CSS and JS? Well, again, HTML is the content of your document. CSS is how your document looks, how it is styled, the fonts, the layout, the colors. And JavaScript is how the document behaves. How do you respond to things that happen? How do you respond to events that happen, to the clicks and the mouse moves and things like that? The P5 editor will give you these files called sketch.js and style.css. We'll leave those names in place for now and change them later. For right now, our document has no actual content. So let's put some content in there. Let's make a BMI calculator. So we'll type in the words BMI calculator. And what do we see? I don't really see anything here, but if I highlight it, well, I'm sorry, we have to run it. Don't see anything, but nope, the words BMI calculator are there. It's just that the text renders in black by default, and my background is very dark by default. So we can go into our CSS and say that our body has a background color of light gray, and now we can actually see the words BMI calculator a little bit better. We can get a little more fancy and actually mark up. That's the M in HTML. Let's mark things up so that our BMI calculator is actually a document level 1 heading. And then let's put in some input boxes so we can enter our height and weight, because what we're going to make is a BMI calculator, body mass index. That's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. So let's put some input boxes in here. We're going to use the span element as a way to identify pieces of the document so that we can manipulate them in JavaScript and style them in CSS. So we're going to be asking first for weight in kilograms. And we're going to have an input box. That's all you do, input in some brackets. Looking good already, right? Span for the height in meters. Span, another input box. And let's have a span for the result. BMI is. That can go in a span. We'll have one more span. And I don't know what the BMI is going to be at the beginning, so I'll just use a question mark. And okay, we have started. We now have something that we can type into. But what we want to do is that every time something is typed into, one of these two boxes typed into, we need to fire off a computation and display the result where the question mark is. And for this, we need JavaScript. So what is JavaScript supposed to do, though? Well, JavaScript is supposed to say the following. Whenever something is typed into one of these boxes, read the value from the boxes, perform a computation, and write the result. So JavaScript has to have this notion of whenever something happens. JavaScript is based on events. We sometimes say JavaScript is event-driven language because JavaScript code tends to run when events happen. What kind of events? Mouse moves, mouse clicks, data entered into an input box. Okay, let's deal with that. First thing we need to do is identify these two boxes. So we make JavaScript variables called, I'm going to call them weight box and height box. And these are going to refer to these two elements in HTML. So we have to be able to find them. In JavaScript, document.querySelector will identify and find particular elements somehow or other. These two things here are input elements, but I actually have more than one input element. So in order to distinguish elements with the same name, we'll use the ID attribute. Let's give the weight element an ID of W and the height an ID of H. Now I can find the weight box by saying it's the input element whose ID is W. In fact, if you have an ID, we usually don't really care what the element name is, and we sometimes just identify them with their ID by itself. And now I have two JavaScript variables that refer to the elements. And now I can say weight box. Whenever, I want you to listen, you see saying the weight box, hey, I want you to listen for input events. An input event is a thing that happens whenever something is typed in. You get an input event. And in response to that, you're going to update the BMI. Now let's do the same thing here for the height box. So hey, height box, whenever an input event happens on you, we're going to call the function update BMI. And what can update BMI do? Well, the job of update BMI is to read the values out of the weight and the height boxes and update the BMI span on the document, right? Now, just so you see how we update the span first, because that's actually pretty easy, let's make sure we can identify where that span is. Right here is going to be the span that's going to get that value. So just like before, let's create a JavaScript variable called BMI span. It'll be BMI. And we're going to say here what? BMI span. We update its text content property. And well, I don't know, for right now, let's just make it 100 just to see if it works. Yep, I type things in here and it turns into 100. But we could do better than that, right? Let's actually get the weight in kilograms. And the weight in kilograms is what? We go into the weight box and get the value. And what about the height? We go into the height box, get its value. And this thing over here is really the weight divided by the height squared, right? So let's see, what's complaining about line 10? Oh, always pay attention to those errors. Yep, okay, error went away. 50 kilograms and a height of 2 meters is a BMI of 12.5. That's an easy check to make. And there you have it. We have a BMI calculator. So 40 and maybe a 1.7 meters, okay, gives you another value down here, 13.8. That's some pretty good BMIs. Okay, how are we doing so far? We have a working BMI calculator. Is there anything else to do? Yes, of course there is. It looks terrible. We need to clean up the font. We need to style it up there. We need to get it all laid out. And then maybe we can add in some pretty fun features too, but let's get to styling right now. This is the heading level 1. Let's get that thing centered. So text align center. Okay, there we go. And what else can we do? Well, maybe how about a background color? Background color of, maybe we go with cyan. We have to separate these things with semicolons. Ooh, it's got a lot of padding around here. That's because the body has some padding. So let's get rid of the margin and the padding over here. Okay, good. And the margin itself around the H1. See, every element has a margin, which is what's on the outside of it, and a padding, which is between the content and the border. So I think for H1, let's remove the margin. Let's put a margin of 0. But how about some padding? How about 20 nice pixels of padding in there? Yeah, it looks a little bit better. Okay. And now let's deal with this other code down here. We don't really want it one line. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could have 2 columns? Yeah, it would be much nicer to have 2 columns, right? So let's take a look at how we might do that. Well, these 6 elements right in here, we should probably group those together into a document division. So I'm going to use a div element. And inside this div element, we're going to place these 6 elements right here. And then the cool thing about this div element is because we have 6 things on it, we can set a layout on the div to be something pretty. All right, I'm going to try that right now. I'm going to go into my division and I'm going to say that it's well, the structure, we call it the display. I'm going to set it up as a grid. And we're going to say that the grid template columns, we're going to give it 2 columns. The first column is going to be 100 pixels wide and the second column is going to be 200 pixels wide. And there we got something. It's starting to look a little bit better right over here, right? And let's put in a grid gap of about 15 pixels. So that's not how we do it. That's not grip, it's grid gap. Okay, things are spaced out a bit, but the div itself is all kind of shoved up against the left of the top. Let's get that cleaned up. I said, let's give it a 20 pixel padding as well. And now we have things lined up nicely. Let's see if it still works here, right? 40 kilograms, 1.3 meters, 1.5 meters. There we go. It's useful. It's okay. The font's not all that great though. I think that we should use a nicer font like Avenir. Avenir is a fun font. Yeah, I like that one. And let's we can make the text a little bit bigger, I suppose. Font size of maybe 48 pixels. Okay. Oh, and how about this? How about a text shadow? Text shadow of, we'll set it off 1 pixel to the right, 1 pixel down, 2 pixels in width and white. Kind of outline a little bit of white. Maybe, yeah, it might be okay. If you want to get fancy, we can make this purple. We can make the color of the text itself white and then kind of go with black for the shadow. And let's highlight a little bit more. If you want to get fancy, you can make it a little bit really blurry. It might be a little bit hard to see, but there's a lot of stuff you can do to play around with this. All right, what about the background for the body? Right now we have a background color of light gray. Sometimes, if you want, we can get a little rainbow effect over here. We can use, say, a linear gradient, maybe go 90 degrees, and we'll start from lime and we'll go to lemon chiffon. Maybe we'll have a cyan in the middle. I don't know. You can play with gradients all you like. You want to make it 45 degrees. 45 degrees. Ooh, look at this. Yes, we have a 45-degree gradient, but look, it's kind of repeating itself because our body is not actually as tall as the entire canvas. To get that to work, you can say that you want the body's height to be 100, they call it viewport height units. And that will give us a 45 degrees for the whole thing. And again, how's it working? It's working okay. I think it's fine. Want to be fancy? Want to do anything else fancy? We could make each of the input elements. We could. I wouldn't recommend this, but maybe we can transform them so that they're rotated by 2 degrees. Maybe -2 degrees. They will still work, by the way. I mean, they'll even work at 20 degrees. Not that I would recommend doing stuff like this, but it's definitely doable. I think that looks kind of hideous, doesn't it? -2, -1, that's all fine. Whatever. Or maybe we just don't even transform them at all. Maybe instead what we can do is just get a 3-pixel solid red border around them just to highlight it or something like that. Whatever works. You know, it's all fun, right? One more little bit of JavaScript that's fun. Let's talk about things we can do in JavaScript besides just reading the mouse inputs, or just read, sorry, instead of just reading the inputs. What kind of things might we be able to do? Well, how about this? How about on the span, because can't think of much else to do, let's add an event listener that whenever the span is clicked on, will do something fun. What can we do? Maybe we can make the entire, well, we'll change the background color. So, well, now what we can do is we could actually say, we can make a function called change background color, and we can, like we did before, create a function called change background color. It's possible, but let's do some. Now, while I've typed out this much, let's just do it. Let's just say document body dot style dot background color. Ooh, look what we're doing. We're changing the style, not by going into CSS and typing it in there, but we're changing the styles dynamically. Let's make it teal. So this says if you ever click on the span, you'll change the background color to teal. Not working over here. Span is not defined. It's not span, it's BMI span, that's why. It's really nice that the errors are shown for you right here. Now click on it. And nothing. Change background color. Document.body.style.background color. Is it not like teal? I have something that's not working. I don't like when that doesn't work. BMI span, add event listener, click, change background color, which should change. Oh, you know why? I think that that's not changing because I think the background image is covering that. So background image. Then we can make it, let's make it a radial gradient from red to yellow. I'm not sure that this is a good idea, but oh, that still doesn't work. Why is this not working? Because I can't type? Yeah, because I can't type. That's why it's radial dash gradient. Okay, so we can make this change here, but here's another thing we can do. In JavaScript, functions can be written with arrows. So the parameters go here and the body goes in curly braces. Now, if I wanted to plop this thing right here, I have a nicer way to write this thing. And let's go from orange to yellow, just so you can see that things are indeed changing. And they are. Now it's a little more orangish. Okay. All right. But rather than that, I want to do something that's a little more interesting. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to take the body's opacity. I'm going to take the body's opacity down to 0 when I click on it. But here's something fun. There's another property called transition. And what I want to do is I'm going to make all transitions here. And there's a lot more flexibility than I'm showing you right here because these are relatively short videos. What I want to say here is this. When you click on the BMI span, the opacity is going to go to 0, but over 5 seconds. It's kind of like this page will self-destruct in 5 seconds sort of a thing. So if I click on this thing here, you can see the opacity is going down. And then in 5 seconds, it's going to fade away. Right? Yes, it keeps the background image, that background. those are pretty important things, the background images. Okay, now is there anything else we should cover? What have we covered? HTML is for markup. That's what content you have. CSS is your styles. CSS and JS are connected in the HTML how. CSS is connected via a link element, and the JavaScript is connected via a script element. It's interesting that they're different, but that's the way it goes. We did a handful of styles in CSS, not a ton. We transformed using a rotation, showed you how to transition. With interaction, let's see, we use query selector so that our JavaScript could find the values in HTML that we needed. And add event listener was connecting to a particular element, the idea that if something happens on it, if an event occurs, if something's typed into an input box, if the mouse moves, if something like that happens, you can indeed something happen. You can actually run some JavaScript. Well, I guess we didn't cover this inner HTML versus DOM manipulation. We can get to that pretty quickly. Let's change this code here that makes everything self-destruct in 5 seconds. And rather than that, you could, if you wanted to, you can actually write in here, inner HTML is I can change this whole thing to a new string. I can make this say, hello. I mean, I can actually take HTML text and just shove it right inside the body. You know, you can do that if you want to. Not recommended, but boom, there it goes. I've changed the document's H1 and I blew away the whole rest of the body. I mean, rather than hello, I can even type in goodbye, just as plain old text. And then it doesn't actually like that, does it? It really wants this to be HTML. So maybe goodbye in a paragraph element. Let's click on it. Boom, there it is. It says goodbye. So you could, if you want to, just craft some HTML on your own and put it inside of the inner HTML. That's not really a recommended way to do things. You could instead say, actually add new content this way. And we can make a new element like so. And I need to get a little bit of help on how to do that again. It's HTML append child. Give me a sec to look up an example, which you could find online. So we find an element, create a child. So let's do the following. You can write create element. Let's create a new element which is how about a paragraph element there? And how do we put some text content in here? Let's call this a new paragraph. And we can say new paragraph text content is new text. Woo, woo, woo. And then we'll append the new paragraph to the very end of the body. Right? So now it says in the BMI span, if you click on it, create a new P element, put some text content in there, and then append it to the bottom of the body. So we can click right here, and it says new text. So again, the idea in web apps is it's pretty much this. HTML gives you the initial content. You mark it all up with elements, sometimes with attributes. In your CSS file, you specify how it's initially styled. And in your JavaScript, you respond to events on each of these elements by making changes to styles and making changes to your document by appending children, updating text content. You can even jump into the inner HTML and you can mess around with elements.style. And there you go. That is coverage of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in a browser. Okay. Next step on episode 3, if you choose to continue, we'll be talking about connecting to APIs. Okay, so long for now. Bye-bye.